Hello and welcome to this tutorial. What we're going to be doing is a C# tutorial that's based on some instructions given inside of an assignment and requested to be turned into a Canvas website. So the first thing you'd want to do is read through these instructions, look at the study material and the resources, and then go here to figure out how you're going to submit it. So the instructions here will give you the context of the application or of the scenario, let's say. So that way when you're making the application, you'll know the context in which you're making the application. Then you can go down to the submission requirements, and you want to see each step that you're going to have to perform. So the first thing I do, and the first thing you should do when you are ready to start your application, is to create a folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here on my desktop. I'm going to right click, go to new, and folder. And I'm going to create a new folder on the desktop. I'm going to call this desktop, as it says here, where it says week 2. This one's week 2. So I'm going to call that week 2 folder. Alright, so I have that week 2 folder, and I'm going to double click on that week 2 folder. So the week 2 folder then opens up here. So this is week 2 folder. With that week 2 folder open, I want to be able to go down the list of this submission as I do my project that's situated here in these resources. So what I'm going to do is add a Word document here. If you're using Windows, you just right click, new, and then you can click on Microsoft Word document. I click that, and then I'm going to click week 2 requirements, and then I can double click that, and now I have week 2 requirements here. So I'm going to take these requirements and I'm going to put them inside of this Word document. You can do that by copying it and then pasting it here, or just highlighting it and dragging it over here to Word. So now I have this Word document here, and I have my resources, my requirements inside of this Word document. So as I finish them, I can go ahead and cross it off. So I already did this part, week 2 folder. I haven't put it on Google, but I've done that part, so I'm going to go ahead and cross that off. And now I'm going to work on this part here. So I'm going to highlight this, and then I'm going to go here to the fonts category underneath the home tab, and I'm going to change that into green. Now you could do this with Google Docs, Word, it really doesn't matter. Anything that's going to help you maintain order as you move through, so that way you finish your requirements. So now I go to this step. I put it in green so I know I'm working on that step. So then I go ahead and click on the resources and watch the video. Now I'm ready to do my application. I'm ready to work on my application. So I'm going to open up Visual Studio. And the first thing I'm going to get, if you're working in Visual Studio 2019, is this view here. And we're going to be working in C#. So we want to go here to create new project. We're going to go here and change this to C#. Then we're going to go to the right of that and make sure it's in Windows. And then we're going to go to desktop if we're making a desktop application, or we can go down here to console if we're making a console application. So in this tutorial, we're going to make a Windows desktop application, and we're going to go down here to WPF. We're going to make a WPF application. So there's different kinds of applications here. You see there's Windows Forms. Those are the old school Windows applications. You have unit tests. You have all kinds of things here. The only thing you want to know is that what type of application do you want the end user to have? A more modern application is going to be made with WPF. And so I'm going to click on WPF and go next. And then I can name this. Let's say oops. And then the next thing you want to make sure of is the location that you put this in. Now remember, we just made ourselves a folder here. Remember this folder? we made this folder, so we want to make sure we put this in that folder. You can actually go here to these three dots, find that folder, double click that folder, where is it? And store it here. That's one way you can do it. Or you can go to the folder and click anywhere in the empty spot and it'll highlight that folder. You want to copy that, come back here and paste it either here and hit enter, and then it'll bring you to that folder, or you can even paste it here and it'll go to that folder. Now we just click select folder and now we're in the proper folder. So I'm going to make sure that this is clicked. This is already fine. I don't have to change that, and I'll go create. So what the application is doing is creating a template for us, and it's adding all our files and everything we need to actually have a Windows application working for us. So when we look at this, what we should see is in this main area, we have our window, and over here on the right hand side, we have all of the files that go with our application. We have this Windows right here. This is what we're seeing. So when I see main window.xaml, XAML, that stands for XAML, that's this window here. You see this main window.xaml here, this tab. Then there's another connected code file to this. I'm going to click on this little arrow down here and you'll see this main window.xaml.cs. That's the brains of the application. So when I click on this, you'll see the code behind pops up. You'll see all this stuff. Don't worry about this stuff. This is just basic stuff for the application to run. And don't worry about it, and we'll talk about this stuff later. But for right now, we have ourselves an application that runs with the window. So if I were to click Start, you'll see that I have myself an application. So now what I can do with this window open, if I hold down the space bar, I'll get this little hand here, and I can right click and drag that. If I use the middle mouse button and then hold down the the control key, I can zoom in and out. I can also do that here. I can choose a zoom level. And so the space bar will use the hands, and the control and the middle mouse button will let you zoom in and out. So every time you work in WPF, you'll have a window, which is your user interface, and then you'll have your code behind, and these tabs open up for everything that you click over here inside of your project. So if I were to click on any of these, it'll open up in the tab, including the preferences or the properties. So I'm gonna double click properties, and as you can see, the properties of my application opens up here. And then there's the tab, but also here's the main window tab and the code tab. So I'm going to go back to the properties tab and close that because I was just opening it up. Now the first thing I want to do before I do anything is keep saving. So I'm going to hit Control S to save. The important thing to understand about saving is that it depends on what you have selected over here as to what is being saved. So if I were to click on this right here, I'm saving this application. I'm not saving everything in my solution here, because you can have many programs in one solution. So if I wanted to save everything, all the programs that I can put in here, I want to select the solution first, then hit Control S, or select the solution, go here to File, and then go here to Save. And you can see it says Save Week 2 loops.sln. That's for solutions. If I were to go here and click on the project, and then I go to save, you'll notice it doesn't have that SLN on it. It just says loops, which means you're just saving that project, not everything in the solutions. So the best way to do this is to select the solutions, then hit Control S to save. So now let's go ahead and get to the meat and bones of what we want to do. We want to create loops, and we want to create an interface that has those loops there. So the first thing we want to be able to do is create a button. I'm going to go here to my tools, and this is where all your tools are for creating your user interface. And we're starting off with the user interface. because it's the most straightforward way to do it. Later on, when you get better, you can start off any way you like. So here I go ahead and I click on this button. I can double click this button, or I can drag the button onto the interface. When I do that, what I will notice here on the side, this side where the solution is, right below that is the properties window. Even before that, the property window was there. But the properties window is important because it tells you the properties of the thing you have selected. So right now, I have this button selected. And how do I know? Well, for two reasons. Number one, over here in the property selection, I can see it says type button. The second reason is you see these little blue handles around it. And actually, there's a third way I can tell it was selected. Because every Windows WPF application has two things connected to it. It has the application itself with the code, and then it has something called XAML. So a UI component is made up like an HTML website. The XAML down here defines how this looks. So when you look here, you see it says grid, and it has a closing grid. The XAML has to have everything open and closed in order for it to work, mostly. Because this button, as you can see, it doesn't have an open and close, but it does have this little slash at the end, which makes it closed. Okay? We're not going to talk about the XAML too much, but just understand that every time you add something here, it's going to automatically write it here. And so let's look at that for a second. I'm going to go ahead and double-click another button. And as you see, the button came up here. There's the button. And if you look down here, there's a button. So I have two buttons. If I were to select this button down here, you can see it's selected up here. If I select this button right here, it selects this button here. So this is another way of selecting things. And why would you have that? Well, because sometimes you have such a complicated view. Let's say if this was here and I was trying to select something that was behind something else and I couldn't see it. Well, I can go down here and select it, instead of trying to move things around to then select it. I can also go down here and come up here and delete it. But what you just notice is that I changed that word button to something else. It says B-U-T-O-N, so that's not button. So there's an error in this code. When there's an error in the XAML, this is what you'll get. Invalid markup. It doesn't know how to render the view. So remember, whenever you're messing with XAML, you can really mess up your view. It doesn't mess with the code, but the application cannot run because the view is not relevant. So I can go ahead and put that button back, and now the squiggly line is gone, and now I have my view back. So if I were to select this and I wanted to delete it, I have to go back up here and make sure that I'm not just deleting this, or I can delete that declaration right there, and now that's gone. So I'm going to go ahead and push this to the side. I'm going to resize this using these little handles here, and I'm going to rename this button. All right, so I'm going to hit enter. So there's my enter button. If I select this button, I can see the properties over here. So here's how we operate. We create a button or an object, then we name that button immediately. So I'm going to go here to the name, and I'm going to type BTN for button. And this is how we name everything when we're coding in object-oriented coding constructs. We always give it some sort of prefix that tells the person who's coding what it is they're using. So we put BTN for button, and for a label, we might put LBL, right? LBL, then the name. And it always starts normally, you'll see it in what's called camel casing. Camel casing is when you start the first word off lowercase, and then every word starts with an uppercase after that. So this is button, BTN, enter, and that just makes it more readable. This has nothing to do with the code. It simply makes your application more readable to other programmers who will be working with you and yourself when you're working behind the scenes to be able to code. So I can go down here into these resources here, and I can change, or the properties. I can change the appearance of this. I can add the effects to it. I can go here to the brushes to change the color of it. I can even add images. We're not going to get into that right now, but we can do a lot of things in these properties. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Now the next thing I want to do, because I want to create a loop of something, so I'm going to make a list item here. Let me go down here to a list box. Sounds good. So I'm going to drag this list box over here, and let's go through our process. I drag the list box, I adjust it to what I want. I go over here and I'm going to name that LST for list, and I'm going to call this items. And then I can adjust what color I want if I want to do that. Go to brushes, and then I can change the color over here, and that's fine. And that's the background color. The foreground color is going to be like the text, so maybe I can make that red or something. And right now we can't see it because we don't have anything in our list. But when we actually code something in our list, we'll be able to see that. So now we're ready to code. And when we go back here to the code, we can see all of this stuff. So you ignore everything except for these items here. So this right here is that window we're working in. It's this window here we're working in. Okay. But before I do any coding, I want to take a look at something all the way right here. You see that little star? That star means whatever you're doing, you just did some stuff and it's not saved yet. So it's always good to look there once you start moving forward and hit Control S every once in a while on that tab to make sure it's saved. Now the star is gone, and so I'm okay. I'm going to go back here, and I can see that there's this initialize component. In WPF, you'll always see this because this is what's initializing this window and the UI. Then I'm going to go down here, and here's where I'm going to add all my code, okay, for when the window first starts. So the first thing I want to do is do a test. I want to see this application work. We did the first test when we ran it the first time, but we want to do another test. And the other test is to print something out. So I'm going to go down here to the bottom, and what you will see down here is an output window right here. If you don't see the output, you can go here to view, and then you go down to output right here. And then this window will pop up. Output window is for whenever you print something out to what's called the console window. And the console window is used for debugging, for changing things, testing things, looking into objects and stuff like that. Don't worry about it right now, but you can print out to it to see what the code is doing. And the way we would do that in C# is we will type console, and what happened is as you start typing, you will see the application trying to guess what you meant. If halfway in your typing you see what you want, you see that right there, you hit tab and it'll automatically type out the rest for you. We want to hit console dot write, and as I start writing that, we can go ahead and choose what we want, write line, and hit tab and it'll write it out for us. However, it is better sometimes when you're first starting to write it out yourself, because one thing you need to know is that C# is case sensitive. That means if I have this right line and I have this right line and I make this lowercase and this lowercase, this is not the same thing. It has to have a capital for the first word in order for it to mean the same thing. So now I have this console write line, and now to print something out to the console, I can go ahead and put a double quotes in there, and then I can put hello world just for a test. And I'm going to hit save. Now I'm going to go here to start. Now, I can go here to start, or I can click F5. So I'm going to hit F5 to run it. Now that I have my application running, you can see nothing's happening here. So there's nothing happening, but yet I have a working button and I have my list ready to go. So I can go ahead and close that. And one thing I want you guys to be aware of, when I run this application, people make this mistake a lot. They run the application and they don't close the application, then they click on this. So now they think they're actually working in their file. The problem is the application is still running. So when you see this stop button here, it means your application is still running, and whatever you do here is not going to work. So you go ahead and hit stop first, if you don't close the window. And then you can go ahead and start working. Now, you notice when I ran my application, I didn't see anything in the window, but yet it still worked because we were not looking for this information in the window. I'm going to run it again just to show you. Let me hit start. And even though we don't see anything here, if I go down here to the output, you'll see somewhere in that output, you'll see this. See that hello world? So we actually was the computer is doing all of its stuff, so that's why it's printing all that stuff out. It print hello world, and then it continued some more stuff down there. Okay, so that's how we would check that out. So now we notice that our application is working. So now we want to go ahead and look at making our loops. So what I'm going to do, because this video is going on very long, what I'm going to do is I am going to type it out and explain it. Give me 1 second. So this loop right here is actually going to give us an integer here, which is 0. And we'll talk, we talked about integers earlier, but we can go more into depth into that later. So it's just a container that's holding 0. Then we're checking to see, so we have that semicolon there. We're checking to see if I is less than 5. And then we close that off with a semicolon. The semicolon in C# just means like period. Stop there. And then go to the next thing. And then we say I++. I++ simply means whatever I is, add 1 to it. So if I is 1, you add 1 to it, that makes it 2. If I is 2, you add 1 to it, it makes it 3. That's all that means. And so it's going to say for I equals 0, starts off at 0. As long as I is less than 5, continue adding 1 to I. So it's going to keep on looping until this is true. While this is true, sorry. It's going to continue while this is true. When this is no longer true, it stops. So I'm going to run this. And then in my output, look down here. It says 0, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So it ran 5 times. Now, how can we get this loop into our button? So that way when we run it, it's not that the loop starts when we run. We want the loop to start when we click the button. Well, first let's stop our application. I'm going to go back to this window here, and I'm going to double click this window, this button over here. Double click it. Now look what happened. C# automatically wrote this template for the button out for me. You could have typed this out yourself and it would have still worked, but it's easier to double click on the edge of it, not where the text is, on the edge, and it will go ahead and write this out for you. Now what you want to do here is hit Control S to save this. Control S to save. And now between these two brackets, between this bracket and between this bracket, that represents this action. So instead of this part starting here, we're going to want that to start inside of that button. And we want to make sure that all of that is inside of this class. So see, that's why this is important. So when you look at these elements here, pretend like those are opening of the box and closing of the box. And this right here has an open box and a closed box. And anything in that would run what's inside the box. It's like a jack-in-the-box almost. This right here has an open box. See this right here? And then it has a closed box. Even the for loop has an open box and it has a closed box. Everything is contained in its own little box in a way. And I'm using the word box because I don't want to get technical here, but just understand it that way. So now when I run this, we'll notice down in the console window, we don't get that 1, 2, 3 anymore. We just get all that starting stuff, right? So over here, I can right click on this and I can hit clear all. I can right click on my output and clear all. Now I'm going to go back to my application and then I'm going to click on enter. And now look, it went 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice. So we got ourselves a loop going. Now we just want to put that loop into a list box. So we're going to stop this. So the first thing we want to do is go into our loop here and we're going to make some space. Now, I want to add a comment. And when you look up here, you'll see comments in green. Comments is just something that's there that, it's not going to run. It's maybe for your understanding, maybe a link to some place that you want to remember, maybe some information about the code or some information that you want to convey to other programmers. But here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this double slash, and I'm going to put a comment here. Add items to the list box. There we go. And that's just a comment there. It's in green. It's never going to run, but it's for our clarity and our understanding for reference for later. Now I need to get access to my list box. And remember, we named the list box. So I'm going to go back here. And you notice this list box, if we go over here, remember we named it. And this is the reason why we named it, so we can have access to it in the code behind. So I want to make sure I have that name, list items. And I can go back here and I can type LST items. Okay. And you notice as I started typing LST, it started helping me because it knows that that is an item that I put up on the front UI. And I can hit tab right there. Now I want to be able to add dot items and then dot add. Now you're looking at a convention here. You notice how we went console dot right line and then we put the I in there? Well, it's the same thing here. We're doing list items, except we're not sending it to the console. We're sending it to the list items object. And then we're grabbing its items, whatever items it has, and then we're going to add an item. And what item do we want to add? We want to add I. Now, instead of I, it's probably better to type this as index because it's more readable to people. So I'm going to type index. And I want to make sure all of these are indexed. We could name this anything we want. We want to make sure that whatever we do is more readable. Now that I changed that, you'll notice that this is an error because it doesn't know what I is. So I have to change this to index as well. Here, down here, I want to add index in here. So now that squiggly line is gone, but see when I didn't have that there, you see this red squiggly line? That red squiggly line means that there's an error. If I were to try to run this, I'm going to hit start. You'll see it can't run. There's an error. I'm going to hit no. I don't want it to continue to build. And I can go down here. You'll notice down here it says there is no argument given that corresponds to the required formal parameter new item. And so it'll tell me the error, it'll tell me what project is in, it'll tell me the file, and it'll tell me the line number. Line number 37. So if I go to here to line number 37, you'll see that's where that error is. I can also double click on this and it'll send me right to the spot where the error is. Not all errors are this way, but most of them are. So I'm here at this error and now I can go ahead and fix it. Now I see the little star up there. I'm going to hit Control S to save. Then I'm going to run it. And there we have it. What happened here? What happened? My program is not working. Well, think about this for a second, because this happens a lot to beginners, okay? So they'll program something and they forget the process of their application. They forget they have to press enter. Seriously, this happens all the time because you're in the middle of trying to learn how to program and you forget, wait a minute, it didn't pop up on its own. Well, because you have to know what you meant the user to do. This is why user interface design is so important, because you have to know how your application works, just like you have to know how the internet works, right? You go to Google and you don't sit there and wait. You have to type something in. Okay, so it's the same thing here. So I'm going to click on enter, and there we have it. We have our list of things inside of a list box. And we've used a for loop. Now, there's all kinds of loops in C#, and you want to go look at some and research some. So how would you research? Well, there's a couple of places that you can go. One of the main places, however, is W3 Schools. So I'm going to open up w3schools.com. So here's W3 Schools. You'll get a ton of stuff here. And if you go here to C#, you'll see under loops, you'll see the one that we just used, the for loop. You'll also see the while loop. While. And you want to be careful with this one because you definitely need to make sure you can stop this because this can result in an endless loop. This is why we start off with the for loop, so we can define it exactly what we want. But you can try some of these out in this same application. Make more buttons, make more loops. But in the end, you now have an application that has a loop, and you can add it to a list box, and you're working in WPF, and you're coding in C#. So this is just the beginning of our journey to making things much better and easier for us as we move forward to actually making possibly some games. So one of the things that I probably should have done was not name this week 2, because who knows what week this will be in. What I should have named it was something like just the title, something like Learning to Loop or something like that. But name it whatever you want. Name it what makes sense. You can't do this. I'm just doing that right now, but you can't just rename it. It'll mess everything up. So right now, this is fine, but whatever week that you're in, you want to make sure you name it that week, and whatever you want to call your application, make sure you name it that. Something that is easy for you to remember. So let's add a little bit to our code here. Let's say if we wanted this to loop a random number of times. So we're going to add a random number generator to our application. That's going to be interesting. So this video has already gone extremely long, and I understand that, but really it's a lot of information here to really get you started and going, so that way you understand things a little bit more clear, and later on we'll dive deeper into some of these concepts. So I want you to ignore everything else except for what we're talking about. So I'm going to pause it really quick, and I'm going to type out the random number here, and to make sure this video goes a little bit faster. Give me 1 second. So now what I have here is this random equals new random. That's the only thing I wrote. And so what this does is it creates a type of object called random. It's a type, and that's why it's in green. And then I named it whatever I want. It's up to you, whatever you want to name it. Like if you had a box in your closet and you wanted to name it something, you would name it whatever you want, right? There's not any particular rule to what you want to name it in, but there are some rules to when you're working professionally. So you would want this name something that's easy for you to remember and easy to read. So I just called it random with a lowercase r. It can't be the same as this uppercase because that will cause a problem. This is a key word inside of C#, and you can't have a variable name the same thing. So I just called it random with a lowercase r because it's obviously a random, and I can call it, if I wanted to, random number. Make it even easier for whoever's reading it, but then I would have to change this right here to random number, and then I would have changed this to random number. Okay, so right now what I'm doing is I'm creating this random number equals a new random number, and then I stop it with that semicolon, and then I create another box, another variable right here called new number. And again, it's a variable, so you can call it anything you want. I can call it n. But as this goes down, if I keep on coding and I just have n, no one will know what I'm talking about. And eventually, I'll confuse myself, even with my own program. So this is why we call it something that we know. And new number may not even be a good name. Maybe I should call it new random number. And that's why we use camel casing. As you can see, it's easier to read. Now, this new random number is an integer. It's a type of variable, like strings, integers, doubles. This is an integer, meaning it's a number, and that's the only thing that can go inside of here. So then I take this random number object, this random object called random number, and then I call a function in there. I say random.next, and then I say I want that next random number, whatever number you pull, I want it to be between 0 and 25. And then I want you to go ahead, whenever this loops through, I want you to put that number in here. Now, it's not going to keep adding this because this, as you can see, is outside of the loop. So when the code gets here, it's going to loop this over and over and over again. So it's only going to get this one time, and then it's going to loop this over and over and over again with that one, and it's going to do that 5 times. Okay, so let's see that happen. I'm going to hit start. And I'm going to hit enter. And right now I'm getting this system random, and I'll show you why. Because here, if you notice, I'm putting this random object in there. And this will happen sometimes. So I really want you to pay attention to this. This object is here. It's just an object. This is not a number. What this object puts out is a number. So when I put that here, all it's printing out, all it's adding is that object itself, not the number it produces. So whenever I run it, you'll notice it's saying system random because we are calling a system random object. So I want what that system random object produces, which is put inside of this box. So I have to take this box and place it in here. So now whatever it produced, which is an integer, will go in here, and it's going to go in here, and it's going to do it one time. It's going to be the same thing over and over again. So I'm going to hit start and hit enter. And now you can see it produced 9 over and over again. You're like, well, that's not random. Well, it is. That's the first random number it produced. And because we're not doing it over and over again, it only did it once. So in order to make this do it over and over again, we'd have to take this code and put it in here to rerun this code. However, what I'd like to do is take this random number of times and change this from 5 to that variable, whatever number I get here, to this. So now I should get a random number in here that I started with, and then I'll get a random number of items in my list that it's going to loop through. So I'm going to hit start. And now I'm going to hit run. And so I know that there's 18 items in this list, right? So I can scroll down and there's 18 items all the way down to the bottom of this list, which is great. So now, not only do we have a program that actually loops through an item, so let's say we had game items or items for a character, we also now have the ability to add random items or random lists inside of our program. And we also understand how we can create a user interface to make it easier. But you know what? We can make this even easier for our users. Okay. Right now, whenever they want to close our application, they have to click on the X button. Let's go ahead and create another button really quick, and we'll change the name. That's the first thing we need to do. BTN exit. Okay. And then we'll go here and click on that middle, and we'll put exit. So that way the user knows this is how you're going to exit our application. And you can click on the brush if you want to change the color if you want to. It's up to you. Maybe we got this backwards. Instead of enter, it should have been green, and this should have been red, but it's up to you. So now I have my exit. I'm going to double click it. I already named it. And now I'm going to double click it. I have to double click on the edge so it can write this here. Okay. Now in between this open and close part of this box, this is where I'm going to write my code. I'm going to put a comment, exit application, and I can put some comments in this one here. I already did that comment there. Write to console. All right, so now I'll remember all this stuff when I come back to this. And also, what I would like to do is, let's say I got some information from W3 schools, and I'm, you know what, I want to remember this. I want to be able to go back here. So I'm going to copy this link, and then I'm going to go and put some references down here. I can put it all the way down here. And I can put all my references down here. And so this will help me out. You can put it up here too, you know, whatever's good for you. A lot of times what programmers do, they don't put this down here. They will put it all the way up here at the top level. Something like that. Or they'll put it here inside of this comment. Now the thing about this comment area here, right here, C# put that there for you. If I go here and I hit enter, it'll automatically make a new comment spot for me, you see. So it's probably good to use this summary area, and you can do that. And as I hit enter, it'll keep making areas for me to comment. I'm gonna hit save. And now I'm gonna go ahead and program my exit button. So the way we do that is we type this dot close. All right. Now, this simply means this class right here. So this main window. So instead of me typing main window, it's easier to type this because we are inside of this class. And dot close. And then I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to hit start. And so I have an application out here, and I'm going to hit enter. Now I have this random number. I hit enter again, and watch this. It did 11 more times, and I can keep on going enter, and I'll be able to see those different 23 times. And I can exit my application without having to go all the way up here. I can have my users exit from there. So now to save this, okay, application, we already did save it in the proper folder. So, but let's say I forgot which folder it was in. I'm hitting it. I can't find my folder structure. Well, there's an easy way to do this. One of the ways actually is to hit save as. So if I, first of all, I got to select my solution here. Then I go here to file and I hit save as. And you'll notice it opened up right inside of that where it's currently saved. Another way to do this, which will send you right to the folder, is make sure you hit Control S, make sure everything is saved. Then you go here to the solution, and then you right click on it, and then you go all the way down here to Open Folder in File Explorer. And then it'll open inside of your window. Now what you want to be able to do is go back one, and this is the folder we want. We want this. We don't need these requirements because now that we are done with all those things, we go back to our requirements and we cross this out. We've completed that. Let's see. Now we're about to upload it to the Google Drive. We can do that. Upload, completed, submit it. Good, perfect. We're going to do that. So let's pretend like we did that. And we want to make sure we do these ones with a star on it, because if we don't do that, read this down here, it means even if we did all of this, nothing else would work, right? So that's what the star means, and you'll always get this alert down there. So let's say we did all of this. We'll cross all that out, and then we will create a shareable link, and we'll cross that out. And now we're done with our requirements. I can just go ahead and close that. If you want, you can save it. You don't have to turn this in. That's up to you. What I need is this, though. So I'm going to right-click on this right here, and I'm going to go down to Send To. Compress zip. And now what I have is this one here. Okay. This is what I upload to Google, and this is what I send. So you can upload this to Google if the requirements tell you to, or you can upload it directly to your Canvas if the requirements say you don't have to upload it to Google. So I know this was a long video, but there's a lot of information in here, and it's really going to help you out in the future. And go over this as many times as you need. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any comments, leave them in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.